Hello, everyone. Welcome to Perfectly Healthy. And with me today is Taylor Dukes. She is my darling friend, patient, and colleague. And she is 3 years out from a really life-changing diagnosis. And I wanted to share her story because she is a medical practitioner and she was trained conventionally, just like I was. And then she learned how to, study functional integrative medicine. And then she learned how to navigate, a very scary diagnosis with a brain cancer. And so she has all these different viewpoints on the whole thing, whether it's conventional medicine, conventional diagnosis, conventional treatments, and then everything else. And so meet Taylor Dukes. She's a young
Oh,
mommy also of two little precious boys.
you're so sweet. They love you. My son had ice cream for the first time at your house. Healthy, of course, but they still talk about my ice cream healthy doctor.
Yes, ice cream
But
can be healthy.
it's clean. And you know what? There's times and places, I think, especially in the cancer world, we also have to enjoy the little things in life. Now, there's times and places for strict therapeutic protocols, but there also is something about enjoying life and being in community. That's therapeutic too. But anyway, yeah, I would love to share my story, and I'm so honored. And a lot of you probably know that I worked with Dr. Connealy. She was one of the first phone calls that I ever made when I was diagnosed. But long before I was diagnosed, I'm going to share my screen here and share some slides with you guys. Long before I was in the kind of oncology world as a patient, I never thought that would be my story. I have another story of a health journey. And I think so many people, cancer is not an overnight thing. And so I kind of want to back up and share a little bit of my story. And it is hard when people are like, oh, Taylor Duke, she's the healthy one. She had cancer. But what I like to remind people so that they're not living in fear, but also that they feel empowered is that I had a health journey. And that's how I got into this integrative functional medicine world. And I was really sick. And so I will just jump right in. These are pictures of me back in the day. I grew up in Texas and I went to TCU for nursing school. And really, my dream was just to be a trauma ICU nurse or an ER nurse. I was an adrenaline junkie. That would never serve me now, knowing what I know about the adrenals and cortisol and nervous system. But that's just what I wanted to do. And when I graduated from nursing school, I had the opportunity to go do some medical mission work in both Africa and Ecuador. And while it was an amazing experience and literally life-changing in every single way, I got really sick being abroad. And it wasn't just one thing, like Dr. Connealy says, and like I always share, it's drops in the bucket over time. It's the cumulative effect of little things. And then one day the bucket tips over and all the symptoms manifest. And so I was in Ecuador doing medical mission work, and I actually got flown home early from when I was supposed to because I was having all these issues. And as you can see, my skin here was very reactive. I was having rashes, histamine issues. I had full-blown cystic acne, and I never even had preteen acne. I was somewhat healthy growing up. And so while it was such an amazing experience, it really, my health took a turn. And I felt really convicted because at the time I was a nurse, a registered nurse, and here I was, my whole job is to advocate for patients, and I couldn't advocate for myself. And so I was going from doctor to doctor, specialist to specialist, trying to figure out why am I having joint pain? I'm 22. I shouldn't know what that feels like. And rashes and gut issues and just all sorts of issues. I was always sick. Anytime I would travel, my immune system, I would just be down for a week. I was having insomnia, just all sorts of things. My thyroid was out of whack. So after going to multiple specialists, trying multiple prescriptions, even doing procedures, no one really had answers. They're like, well, maybe you should try the sleeping pill and da da da, and maybe you should try this in the colonoscopy. You can try this Linzess IBS medication for constipation. But I had stomach pain too. And so I finally got to a point where I wasn't bought into the integrative healthy lifestyle, but I was desperate enough to do something different. And praise the Lord for my mom. I actually grew up in a really healthy home. And, you always kind of go back to your roots. And my mom really advocated for seeing a functional medicine provider and even a naturopath. There was this little compounding pharmacy that would do consults. And so she had me meet with a naturopath while I was on a wait list to get in with a functional medicine provider, who was a medical doctor. And this was in Austin, probably around 2013. And so again, I wasn't bought in. I was very hesitant, and I just thought I never learned any of this in nursing school. That's woo-woo, hippy dippy medicine, not evidence-based. But boy, was I wrong because after working with a functional medicine provider, It literally changed my life, times and places for prescriptions, but I was able to get off all of them. I had my life back, my energy, my skin, my hair stopped falling out, and I finally had answers. I've for so like Dr. Connealy and clinics that work on integrative and functional approach, not just to cancer, but to anything. They're always asking the why question. Why are they having IBS? Why are they reacting to everything? Or why is this autoimmune disease going on? And they're looking for answers versus just a diagnosis and a prescription. Times and places for prescriptions. Doctor, I'm capable of prescribing as a nurse practitioner, even though I don't practice anymore. But Dr. Connealy too, we're both fans. It's not black or white, like holistic or conventional. I like to say it's integrative. It's both and for the best possible outcome. And so, needless to say, they had a bunch of different answers, and I had viral pathogens. Of course, I had parasites living abroad. Lots of stress this time in my life, personal family stuff going on, which people do not give enough credit to stress and trauma. That is so huge and how it affects our immune system and how it affects our health overall. And so it was really the perfect storm. And looking back, I'm like, oh, I can see how this all kind of happened. I was on malaria medication I was on antibiotics to prevent malaria for 3 months in Africa. Well, that destroyed my gut and made me more susceptible to pathogens. And so, anyway, all that to say, it changed my life, changed the trajectory of my career. Some of you know Amy Myers. She's a medical doctor, but she's a New York Times bestselling author. And I was her nurse for years. And that's how I was able to really learn the functional medicine world and protocols and treating patients. And then ultimately, she closed down her practice. So I went back to nurse practitioner school and started my own practice. And this was in 2000. Around 2020 is when I started my own practice. I had a kid at this point. Life was good. I didn't have a ton of health issues. I was definitely more sensitive. I was always kind of like, man, I feel like I shouldn't be as sensitive as some of my friends, but I really cleaned up my diet, my lifestyle. Probably could have managed stress better looking back. It was a busy season starting a private practice and a wellness center. And which leads me to kind of part two of my health and wellness journey. And what I will share with you guys, and Dr. Connealy, I know you're big on this, but cancer doesn't form overnight. It usually takes, what I've been told is 8 to 10 years by the time there's a circulating tumor cell to full blown tumor and manifestation of symptoms. And if you look back at my timeline, this was exactly about 8, 9 years. And so this is part two of my health journey. It's still pretty surreal sharing this because I'm like, man, I wish I could have just ended at part one. But this is my story, and there's been so much purpose through it. And so it was September of 2022. I was so passionate about educating. I still am. And I had a free blog of just health articles and information I love sharing, and even started Instagram, not because I wanted to grow it, just because I was wanting to share healthy, non-toxic finds and healthy grocery store things. And most of you are familiar with Prenuvo, but if you're not, they're a full body MRI company. And at the time, there was only one in California. And I'm always doing research for my patients. I'm a nerd like Dr. Connealy. In our spare time, we're always researching. But anyway, so I had known about them, but they had reached out and said, hey, we're moving to Texas. We'd love to gift you a full body preventative scan. And I was like, oh, that's really nice. I've heard about you guys and this technology. But I was like, I don't really have any concerns. And my husband's mom had died of non-smoking lung cancer. And so I was really trying to get him. I don't know if you know this, Dr. Connealy, but I was really trying to get him to do it. I was like, can he do it? And I'll still go with him and take a picture and share. And they were pretty adamant, which I'm like, thank you. That was literally God's provision that I did it. But they were pretty adamant, like, we want you to experience it so you can share with your patients. And thank
Right.
God I did, because they found, as you can see in this picture, a pretty large brain tumor. And so I just kind of will walk through that diagnosis, and then we can kind of get into the approach that I took. And we're going to save time for questions at the end. But so I was in disbelief. I will never forget. I got the call. Here I am, a young mom. By this time, I had 2 kids. I was nursing my second born at the beach minutes before I got the call. And I thought, there's no way. They got the wrong patient. But the reason
Mhm.
why I felt that way is because I had no symptoms. And this is a pretty sizable brain tumor. You don't have to be a radiologist to know that that little white thing there is not supposed to be there. And so, um, yeah, I had no symptoms. I even looking back, like now that I was aware of it, was like, are you having headaches? Are you? And I really wasn't. So that led to meeting with multiple neurosurgeons, getting follow-up imaging. And I'd also known about Dr. Connealy and different, cancer clinics. And I was like, okay, if a family member, this ever happened, I know exactly who I would call where I would go, and she was top of that list. And I remember I was where I was when I got the call. I was on the porch of the house. We were at a house at the coast at Cinnamon Shore in Texas with my family. And I remember where I was when I called your office. And so I think my story is different than a lot of people's stories, but something that I also want people to know is like you do have options and you need to advocate for yourself. And for me, I was in a little bit of a different situation. A lot of people with brain tumors have headaches. They find it, they're getting brain surgery the next day or week. Or people have a seizure and they're in the emergency room and they never go home. They don't send an out of office email. They don't get time to do a lot of research. But in my situation, and in a lot of people's situations, it didn't happen overnight. It's not a life or death thing. And so for me personally, again, I'm not telling anyone what to do. This is what I did. This was September. I slowed down. And I mean, I talked to my neurosurgeon because I want to be wise, and he said, look, you're not symptomatic, but this has the potential to grow and infiltrate your brain more. You need to get on the books for surgery, get your affairs in order, execute a living will, kind of all the depressing, morbid stuff. But really, I owned a business and I had two young kids and I had to get my husband access to everything. And it was a pretty sobering time, but I also knew that this didn't happen overnight. And so I wanted second opinions. And I always had peace about brain surgery. So when people are like, oh, Taylor Dukes did everything holistic, I like to remind people I did a very conventional intervention. Like I had my brain operated on. So yes, I did a lot of holistic and yes, I did a lot of functional integrative, but I also had brain surgery. And that's where everybody has to make the best decision given their circumstances and surround yourself with a team that can advocate for you. And for example, I went to Dr. Connealy before I even had brain surgery because I knew, and I had the neurosurgeon's blessing to do that. Well, actually, I don't know that they fully knew everything I was doing. They just said it's not emergent, get on the books for early next year. And so I flew out to California and I did a bunch of intensive therapies. And it really is when you first get diagnosed, or depending on how aggressive the cancer is, healing can feel like a full-time job. But that's what I did. It was like I stopped seeing patients. I was full on healing boot camp. And even though I was healthy, I had took it up a notch. I got into metabolic ketosis. That's really good for the brain, and or therapeutic ketosis, and was doing all sorts of therapies from hyperbaric to high dose vitamin C, a lot of things, obviously that they offer. And what I will say is even if I always knew, I said, even if it doesn't shrink, I'm at least preparing my body for a major surgery. And mentally, like you mentally have to be strong going into these things and visualize the outcome and have hope. And so anyway, I waited 5 months before surgery. I got second opinions. I did end up finding a brain surgeon in Arizona at Barrows Neurological. His name is Dr. Chris Smith. And he's amazing. And he believes in the metabolic approach. And he is very much in on everything that I've done. He doesn't have the time to do it, but his wife is a nutritionist and he is amazing. And he's also a very gifted neurosurgeon. And so with that time that I got to do research and advocate, and I was blessed, that we were able to go to Arizona and do that. I did have brain surgery, but before I had brain surgery, we found out that the tumor had shrunk in half, which is miraculous. And Dr. Connealy, with the blood-brain barrier, I mean, it's so hard to treat some certain types of brain tumors. So I was very encouraged, but I always thought that would be amazing if it happened. But even if not, I'm still preparing my body for surgery. And that's what I think is so important for people to hear or for their family members. It's not either or. You can do conventional if that's what you have peace about and if that's what's right to you and what your care team's suggesting. But you can also bring along the integrative to help support your body to mitigate symptoms and side effects. And I see so many people that are doing both. It's not like, oh, I'm going to only go do conventional and then I'll do holistic. I think it's so helpful to have someone like Dr. Connealy or really any integrative oncology provider to be able to establish care early on so that they can help you walk through that, whether it's surgery, chemo, radiation, because there's so much you can do to protect your cells and your immune system. And so, anyway, she's not telling me or paying me to say that. I'm just sharing my journey just so y'all know. But I am a big hype girl of her because I love her. And as you can see, there's our little picture. I wish we were in person right here. But yes, like I said, it was a miracle. We did shrink the brain tumor in half. And I will never forget asking you, Dr. Connealy, I was like, what do you think did it? And you were like, Taylor, we'll never know because we threw the whole kitchen sink at it. But the good thing is we don't have to ask or wonder, and
Right.
there were so many, because there were so many people asking, well, Taylor, what did you do? What's your exact protocol? And really, it was personalized to me. And through a lot of testing that we did and frequency testing. And so there was me getting the EBU at her office. And yeah, I said this earlier, but integrative medicine, it's not like you can only do one or the other. You integrate the two for the best possible outcome. And that's exactly what I did, not only before surgery, but during my recovery. And as you can see me there, I'm in ICU. And if you're medical, yes, I'm tachycardic. And yes, my blood pressure was high. But anyway, I was a little stimulated moving around and obviously in a little bit of pain after brain surgery. But that was me in ICU. And I walked, me being a nurse, I'm like, let's get up, let's get ambulating. But I was able to walk I had to go to the bathroom and they're like, oh, we'll bring you a bedpan. And I was like, nope, I'm going to walk to the bathroom, just collect my little art line, make sure it's all clean. And so I was discharged straight from ICU 24 hours later. And I don't want people to compare their story to mine because nothing about my story is very normal. Like it truly is just miraculous. But I also think it's a testament to how I prepared my body. But it also depends on the part of the brain. Some people have more aggressive operations near the motor strip, and that can affect walking. And I did have, as Dr. Connealy knows, and I'm just transparent. I've shared so much my journey. I had a huge Lyme flare after brain surgery just because my nervous system was, as you can see this picture, there's the hole in my brain. That's where they removed the brain tumor that had infiltrated the brain tissue. And so I had done good for so many years. And then all of a sudden it was like I was having a lot of neurosensory stuff. And so I never went to like a rehab facility, but I did struggle with insomnia, lots of overstimulation. So it was still a really big challenge in my recovery. And I honestly blamed a lot of symptoms on my brain surgery, just thinking, oh, this is brain surgery. I have to wear sunglasses inside or headphones. But when I started doing more of like a Cowden protocol and more Lyme specific stuff, a lot of my symptoms started going away. And I was like, oh, maybe this was just one big triggered flare. And so even symptoms that I had almost said were maybe this is just after brain surgery, there's always hope and there's always healing ahead. And so I do get asked all the time, what did you do? And most of these I've done at Dr. Connealy. Some I've, integrated at home, obviously, with counseling and acupuncture, but it's such an integrative approach of so many different things. And the mental, emotional, I cannot emphasize that enough. Having
Mhm.
mindset is so huge. And I've always been an optimistic, positive person, but it's different when it comes to cancer. Like the way you speak about yourself and the way you believe things and believing in your body's ability to heal. And I just have to share this story really briefly. I will never forget. So I always kind of did integrative stuff. And then getting the brain surgery was my conventional intervention. And my brain surgeon said, look, you have, and for those of you that know anything about gliomas, I had an oligodendroglioma, which is a form of glioma, and it was grade 3. So it wasn't grade 4, the most aggressive. But he said, look, if you go to any neuro-oncologist per standard of care, they're going to say chemo radiation. And he said, I want you to keep that in your back pocket. You're young. I got all of this tumor out. I want you to focus on all the things you're doing with your doctor. And I call Dr. Connealy the quarterback of my care team. And so that's exactly what I did. I did. My husband said he was like, I would just feel better if we had someone locally. And I said, fair. If I ever needed an MRI, I'm willing to do that. I found a really good neuro-oncologist locally where I live and heard she's open-minded, heard she's not going to pressure me into things if I didn't have peace about doing them. And she was great. But I will say mentally, this is the first experience I had with a true cancer center. Because, I've seen cancer patients at your place, Dr. Connealy, and other clinics I've gone to. But walking in the building at a conventional cancer center, everyone's frail, lots of wheelchairs, no hair. And it hit me and then you go to the elevator and there's every single floor, like different types of oncology. So, of course, I hit number 7, neuro-oncology. And I get to my room and I'm pretty strong and I've shared a lot of my journey at this point. And of course, I have my moments and I'm very vulnerable and share how hard this journey is as a young mom. But I'll never forget sitting in that chair and I just start bawling. And my husband's like, What happened? What's going on? Did you get a text? And I think it just hit me that I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't think I've ever identified as a cancer patient, and which is almost a good thing. Like you don't want it to become your identity, but being there in that moment, looking at everyone around me. And so I say that of like, even if you are going through that, and even if you have lost your hair and you are in the thick of it and having to go to treatment every week, like mindset is so important. And I see how doctors speak prognosis over people and they start to believe it and then they're around it all the time and that will wear on your mind and your soul. And so just remember like healing affirmations, mindset. That was such a powerful moment for me to empathize with cancer patients of like, whoa, I'm not even having to show up to chemo every other week, but like this is heavy. And so Anyway, there's a QR code. Fancy, my team did that. If y'all want to see a bunch of the different therapies I've done and books I recommend, like Dr. Connealy's, and there's just tons of resources there. And again, this is just kind of what I did in my journey, just showing how many different things we implemented. And then, of course, supplements. I still have a million supplements. I got my some evening primrose oil right here. I mean, I got supplements everywhere. So, and I still, I'm 3 years out, praise the Lord, from the being cancer free, but I still am on a journey and I still am very mindful of my health. And so I just want to remind you guys that wherever you are in your diagnosis, or if there's a family member, whenever you get that news, and this is my amazing neurosurgeon, this is me in recovery, is just to slow down, pray, process, do research, take the time to read Dr. Connealy's book or other integrative oncology books, because again, a lot of times it doesn't happen overnight. And most times, I'm not saying always, most times it is not an emergency, but you will feel pressured. But my biggest encouragement and advice is don't make decisions in fear. I sat with them and I get it. Not everybody has the luxury to have 5 months before a brain surgery. Like I realize that's not normal, but I just take time, pray, don't make all decisions in fear and get second opinions. Like you have the right to do that and you have to advocate for yourself. And I know cancer is a really scary word and it's something I never thought would be a part of my story. And even as long as I'd been in this functional medicine world, 10 years at the point that I got the diagnosis, I felt ill-equipped with cancer. I was like, I really know nothing. I've since learned that a lot of the things that, looking at heavy metals and mold and all the things that I've always talked about, it is that, but it's so much more. And so finding someone that really understands an integrative oncology journey. And then there are a lot of people that are probably here for preventative reasons. And so these are just things that I still focus on today and that I would obviously did during the cancer journey, but we live in a really toxic world, and not that you should live in fear of everything, but we do have to be more, Dr. Connealy, I know you agree with this. I don't know how to say it. We have to be more proactive now more than ever because of the chemicals and the EMFs and the exposures. So again, don't live in fear, but be empowered to take charge of your health, especially in your home. Like you can't control your work environment. Lucky me, I get to work from home. I have my house hardwired, to reduce EMFs, and we don't use chemicals and have air filters and all of that. But do the best you can to limit your toxic exposure, especially in your home for you and if you have children. And then nervous system regulation is so important. And I learned the value of that after brain surgery because, my nervous system was cut into. So nothing will quite trigger a nervous system flare. Dr. Connealy, you had the same thing after your back surgery. Like you're just,
Right. Major. Yes.
yeah. And
Major.
and I realized just because I can operate at a certain level doesn't mean that it's healthy and that we should. And so that was kind of a little conviction for me, of like, I really need to slow down and prioritize what matters. And for me, I no longer practice. And I owned a wellness center at the time, and I had to step away from it all to heal and to focus on my family. Now, I do work because God, always uses our pain for purpose, and I'll get into that. But, and there's always purpose through every journey. And sometimes it's hard to see and understand, but 3 years out now, I can look back and understand a lot. And then anti-inflammatory nutrition. There's not a one size fits all protocol. I obviously did ketosis, which is great to starve cancer cells, but specifically for the brain. And I know y'all are huge advocates of therapeutic ketosis as well, getting blood sugar down, not feeding cancer with sugar. And then supporting detox pathways and drainage pathways. That's really, really important. And I do my sauna, I dry brush, I take my Epsom salt, baking soda baths. And then hydrating, so important. But these are like the foundations that I think some people get so overwhelmed. And I'm talking about people that don't have cancer. They're like, I don't know where to start and I can't be perfect. And I'm like, just start somewhere. Look at these basics right here. And if you sleep, eat a healthy diet, have clean water, you don't need to be doing every single hyperbaric and infusion. Just get the foundations in place. And then, of course, if you are doing all the fancy stuff, just don't forget about these basics: sleep, recovering, rest. And then, of course, for not only getting to the root cause of health issues, but also preventing recurrence of cancer, which is immune dysfunction, is, addressing Lyme, co-infections, parasites, mold, heavy metals, old viruses. Those are all super, super important. And like I said, my pain has become my purpose and my mess has become my message. And really through the journey, this is a gift that we're giving to y'all for tonight. But my whole thing was, I had stepped away to be mom and I'd worked so hard to become a nurse practitioner, but I'm thankful for how the way that cancer was used because it allowed me to step back and get creative. And now I created a supplement line that I would have never done. It's more a nutritional health product line, I would say, than supplements, but it's just healthier swaps of things out there Like organic chai tea latte has so much sugar. Ours is just monk fruit, organic coconut milk powder, black tea, and real healthy anti-inflammatory spices and electrolytes. And so had I not gone through the cancer journey, I just share this to encourage y'all, but had I not gone through that journey, this would never be a thing. I wouldn't be in a place to homeschool my kids like I do now, and I have more freedom to be mom. And so there's always so much purpose in our journey, even if we don't understand it at the time. But I'm really thankful for that. And yeah, the team created a fancy slide, and y'all, just for y'all being here, if you guys would like to get 15% off, you can do that. And there's a little QR code. So don't go tell the world. This is just for y'all for being here and sticking around. And I think the best thing I would do to end is just encourage you guys that obviously I've been cancer free for 3 years. So I'm kind of on the other side. I don't want to say I'm out of the woods because I'm still on a protocol and journey. But just remember healing's possible. Don't give up hope, no matter what a doctor or a prognosis or Google has spoken over you. Do not give up hope and do not fall into fear and ask questions and always advocate for your body and know your options. And then you can make decisions from there. And like I always tell people, there are so many other things like immunotherapy and clinical trials, but the main things are surgery, chemo, and radiation. And they're amazing and they're tools in some cases, but they're not the only tools. And so that's where it's really helpful to work with an integrative provider that's going to say, and I know Dr. Connealy because I've sent you a lot of people, and she's told people, no, you really do need to follow through with this treatment. This is important. This tumor is too big. And that's where someone like her will shoot you straight and say, look, we can do all the natural and the repurposed meds, but you also need this. And so I think that's really helpful having a sound voice of reason in your corner, like I had her. And especially when I was hearing from my neurosurgeon and hearing from her and what I had peace about, I felt like, okay, chemo and radiation aren't part of my story right now. And then, of course, for me, like if anyone's followed my story, faith is foundational because a lot of my journey was not me operating in my own strength. It was God giving me hope beyond my circumstances and believing that He could do the impossible. And I really felt like so many prayers and so much of my journey, I didn't lean on my own strength. And so, I had healing affirmations and Bible verses that I would look to. And at the end of the day, like, I did a lot of work, but also glory to God because this is my story. And I think He has a purpose and a plan for me that's good for all of us. That's a promise. But I've been able to see His plan and purpose unfold. And for that, I'm grateful. Like even coming into the Zoom call tonight, I'm like, oh man, it's so weird. Cancer is my journey, but I'm also like, thank you, Lord, that I get to be on the other side of this to be able to share and empower others. And so anyway, thank y'all for listening. And Dr. Connealy, thank you for having me and being my favorite doctor ever. I wish I
Oh,
could just come give you a hug
I
now.
know. Yes, you have to come and visit.
I
Yeah.
know, I'm due.
Yeah. So yeah, it's so true, like people so funny, so funny. You practice alternative medicine. I'm like, no. What I do has been doing for hundreds of years. Like
Yeah.
what the medicine today is only about 80 years old. And like obviously, every president since Nixon has declared war on cancer. All right. Since 1970, we're now 56 years later. And every subsequent president has declared war. And where are we with cancer today? In
Oh
the
my God.
last 30 years, cancer in young people 18 to 50 has increased 80%. Okay. The There's about 1,700 people die a day of cancer. Okay. It's not talked about, it's not discussed. There's not this collaborative, cooperative discussion about all the things that we can do and all the possibilities because people don't want to listen to other things, coming from a conventional paradigm to going to both. And you have to marry all of it because I always tell patients surgery, chemo, radiation can be a bridge to get to the other side. But if you want to treat the entire person, you must address every single thing. And I address it in my book. That book was just updated a couple of months ago, but it's a kind of thing that's evolving. It's dynamic. It's changing all the time. New things. Since I met Taylor for her first visit, I didn't have intranasal ivermectin, which I would have used on her. Okay. Now I was just telling her I have two glioblastomas. Okay. They are doing phenomenally well with new updated protocols, which are always evolving and changing. And like the world needs to listen to all possibilities, and doctors need to be open to all possibilities. I saw a patient yesterday from Texas, and she has triple negative breast cancer. And she did conventional chemotherapy, conventional surgery and radiation. And she told me she went to the doctor, and the doctor told her diet doesn't matter. Now we know that what you eat matters, okay, for any disease. To be healthy, autoimmune disease, heart disease, cancer, what you eat matters, okay? And so this is basic information. They did a study of 44,000 identical twins. What was the determining factor whether they were going to get cancer is what you eat and how you live. So we need to ask the patient how they live from the time they were conceived to however age. This girl yesterday was 39. She told me that she had been healthy all her life. She was an athlete, ate well. But when I got to the stress component, her mother is bipolar. She hasn't been with her mother since she was 8. They got divorced. She was with her father, living with her father, who got remarried, terrible stepmother, emotionally unavailable dad, raped 10 years ago. Okay.
Oh,
And so no one has talked to her about it until I do. So how is this possible? How are we possibly taking care of a patient when you have not asked what has happened to this patient? Okay. And so you talked about the stress, mental, emotional component, This is my 40th year of practicing. And I would say that what I've learned, because I didn't learn this in medical school or training, is that the stress, emotional conflict is a huge component. And it's not addressed in medicine today, even though every conference talks about it now. And so we have to, I know they're trying to change medicine. I know we're trying to transform the future of health and humanity. But we got to make drastic changes. We got to be drastic. And so that's why I keep doing what I do. That's why Taylor's doing what she's doing, is because we have to awaken and inspire and educate and empower people on any level, whether it's the eating part, the cleansing part, the stress emotional component. And more importantly, we need to really think about prevention. There is nothing for prevention. I will tell you the last 2 weeks, yesterday, they asked me to review charts to see if I'm going to take the patient. And it's a 28-year-old with stage 4 colon cancer that's already received 40 sessions of chemotherapy. Now, if that is not telling us the world is, their old saying, the canaries in the mine, everybody knows that. The canaries were brought into the mine because they were the sign that the carbon dioxide was too high. I had 2 patients, young patients, 129, 131, pancreatic cancer. This is not supposed to happen, guys. Okay. This is, and every day it's young people. It's not that many old people. It's a lot of young people, their 20s, 30s, early 40s. And I can't be the only one, and Taylor can't be the only one screaming, yelling to be heard that we have got to do something about this. We've got to stop, and say, what do we all need to do, And because I've been saying it's a 911 for about 10 years already. And I feel like I was the boy who cried wolf. Like I am like I am saying this for a long time because I work every day. I see it. I'm in the trenches. Yes, I do podcasts and talks and lectures, but I'm in the trenches seeing it all over the United States. It's not just one state. It's all over the United States. And a patient came in to me today. She's only sees me once a year for just prevention. And she was telling me about her son, who's 31 years old. His best friend died from lung cancer. Okay. He was expert swimmer at Stanford and he was diagnosed and died. So these are messages, and like anything in your body, you didn't have symptoms, Taylor, but if you have things, you need to listen to your body. And
Yes.
I see here all the time. I had a new patient today from Hawaii, and she not has one cancer, she has two cancers. She was diagnosed with colorectal cancer, but she started having GI issues. Okay. And she had like loose stools and diarrhea, and then that led to bleeding. And then it took like a year to get diagnosed. Well, it can't take a year to get diagnosed. Okay. So then she got treated with surgery, chemo, radiation, and now she has a secondary cancer, probably caused from the chemo and radiation. And the CT scans every 3 months, she has a second cancer. Okay. An endometrial cancer, which is close to geographically to your colon. So here I'm going, my goodness, she's 39. She's
Mhm.
39, two cancers. So I told her, like, we must get your body in pristine health that you never get cancer again. So a fellow patient that we had fixed from ovarian cancer from Hawaii sent her. And and you stressed about doing whether you do conventional or integrative. No, this is a new whole body systems medicine now.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm will be developing in the future. It's not like conventional or integrative or functional. It's a whole new systems medicine that has to be. And I'm collaborating with other doctors to create this. Okay. And I have a friend that went to medical school with me, and he used to work at Cedars-Sinai, and he has a residency program because we got to teach the new doctors this new systems medicine. And so, and many doctors now all over the world now are, they all want that too. Because the same problems we have here, we seem to have bigger problems here in the United States compared to other countries. Unfortunately, we tend to be the sickest nation. And that's another problem. Why is that? Okay. But we really together as a community, as a human that cares about another human, elevate every person we possibly can and educate them and really be honest with them about like we've got to work at being healthy now. I
Mhm.
had a little boy, I taped this morning, and a young boy came to the visit with his mommy from Canada. She has breast cancer. And the little boy, he's 15 years old, and he sent in a question to me. He goes, Dr. Connealy, like I'm a basketball player and I want to be healthy, and I see all my friends taller than me. And like, what do you think about all these growth factors like that are in milk and meat and all that kind of stuff? Because a lot of the people are older. And I mean, excuse me, taller than me. And I said, do not get into going for anything. He said all of his friends are unhealthy. And I go, no, you have to set the standard for these boys. I go, you can start the fad to create this contagious revolution with 15-year-olds. Okay. And I told him to start drinking raw milk. And I told them, like you can take supplements to help your pituitary, be natural supplements to help your pituitary function. Get off all the growth hormone eggs and chicken and beef and all that kind of stuff. They're very healthy. And it's got to start from the time, really, I think, before a mother even conceives in this
Oh,
day.
yeah.
This is what I think. My next book would be how to grow healthy children. But it starts with the moment of the intention of wanting to have a child, and
Mhm.
that the mother and father need to collectively, on a spiritual, emotional, and physical level, create these intention and execute this incredible, miraculous planning.
Yeah. I'm in agreement. And especially like you said, being in such a toxic world, like you can't detox pregnant or breastfeeding. And so that is the time to get your body ready, detox, focus on egg quality. It is empowering and you'll have healthier children that will be more resilient.
Right, exactly. And we're living in a world, I know it's hard to believe, people don't realize that the world that we're living today, we're living in the great poisoning in everything, the air, the water, and the food, and they're not informing us, okay? But if you read what I read, everything is contaminated and everything. The everything. There's not anything. So that's why you have to master your self-care because we're all living in this great poisoning, okay? And then you've really got to focus on the food that we're eating. I mean, there's nothing perfect. So you just try to do the best you can, you know? And then you need to practice the self daily care, you know, and you're not going to be perfect. Don't I tell people, don't try to be perfect. Try to do things correctly and excellently.
Hmm.
And if you do a little bit on a regular basis, that's what matters. And, you know, it's so interesting because the spiritual emotional component is what I see. It rules and dictates you, you know.
And
And
most
I
people neglect it because they're like, oh, I'll take all the supplements, I'll do the healthy eating, but I don't want to go there. When really, every other protocol will be so much more effective if you can resolve that because your body is not in a state. And people didn't even realize, and I didn't realize, even myself, being a healthcare practitioner, how much, and I knew I had trauma and I'd gone to counseling, but it was like I needed to do deeper healing for some, and I'm a positive person. People are always like, you had trauma, Taylor? And I'm like, yes, I did. And I like to remind people that it affects your health. And whether it's fear, bitterness, unforgiveness, sexual trauma, whatever it is that someone may have, like press into it because there's so much healing and freedom on the other side of that, whether it's prevention or if you have a cancer diagnosis. Because again, yeah, you see it all the time. And I think it's one of the most things that gets mitigated and dismissed and not addressed. And it's so important.
Right. Well, more importantly, too, people don't realize that now we inherit 15 generations of hair, skin, eye, and emotional DNA. Okay.
Mhm.
And then I have never met a person who hasn't had trauma and drama in their life. Never,
Yeah,
never.
trauma and drama. You say it
Okay.
like that.
Yeah,
Yes.
I've never met a person. Okay,
Not
and
not
that
a thing.
includes myself. I had a patient ask me, she came to see me not for cancer, but she literally came to see me. Her daughters are medical professions, they're a nurse practitioner and a PA. And the whole family came and she can't talk. And she's been to all the doctors literally everywhere. She went to Mass General, she went to the best neurological evaluation. They said there's nothing wrong with her. Well, when I did the first visit with her, she was like completely talking to me. And I was like, okay, she's having a conversation with me. Like, I'm saying this to myself. I don't say it to her. I just go, like, okay, you're not having the problems with aphasia, you know, not being able to talk to me. So then we start, and her husband's just sitting there, and she's able to communicate. And I'm really focusing just on her, talking to her and everything. And so I'm asking her all these questions, and then I ask her. And then when I got to the stress and the drama, oh my gosh, well, her mother, all the kids are arguing over where the mother's going to be, and this sister wants to control everything, and this one wants to do that, and it goes on and on and on. Okay. And so there was just so much stress. And so when I looked at everything, like I did every test, everything, and I told her, I said, you have so much unresolved emotional conflict with your family. So we did emotional work. She went home and I got on Zoom with her kids and everything. And so they told me she had gotten a little worse. And I said, so what happened? I said, what
Yeah.
happened? So that she proceeded to tell me that the mother was going to come in and live with them. And then no, the other sister said no. So they got into this huge, enormous fight. And so she regressed a little bit. So I told her, you've got to do the emotional work every week. And she is getting better. But it's so powerful how stress and unresolved emotional conflict, and it's not something that, like, you can't fix it overnight. I started personally with my own life 30 years ago because I got married and had my children. And then I realized I wasn't in the right, I had married my father. And one of my employees had recommended me to go see a minister who was a life coach. And then I was kind of like, oh my God, how could they help me? Like, what am I doing? Like, this is like kind of crazy. So I was like, okay, I can just go once and see if like what it's going to be like. And I can just walk out. Okay. And then it is the most powerful thing I've ever done in my 68 years. It changed the trajectory of my life. And then all I've done is research all these other things and done them myself. I always tell people I have to do the work myself. Cowden introduced me to Evox 20 some odd years ago. I delivered twins 21 years, I'm 30, excuse me, 31 years ago. I had a very complicated, very traumatic delivery, and I was sick for like 6 or 7 years. And then Cowden had recommended, because he was a friend of mine and he came to visit me in Orange County. And he had recommended me to do Evox. And then I did Evox by multiple people because they all have a different way of doing it. And then I have just continued to grow and do all kinds of different, I call it emotional upgrades because like
Mm.
you're never done. People always get, oh, when do I stop this supplement? When do I not eat this way? When do I not do that? I'm like, what? In your casket is when you don't do any of that. Okay.
You're here. You have the opportunity. Keep
Yeah,
going,
yeah.
right?
So like it's not like you just like, okay,
There's
we're
no
gonna be healthy for
arrival.
4 months and then that's it. No, it is the way of living. And again, like Liliana tonight brought me carrot cake because it was my husband's birthday yesterday. She brought me this beautiful homemade carrot cake. Okay, am I going to eat part of it? Yes, but I will probably have, 2 bites and then I'm fine. And so you've got to live life too. So,
Yeah.
and it's
That's what I said about the ice cream because I'm like, you know what? Like, and I will even say in my healing journey, like there was a time and place where it's not dirty keto, like T-bone steaks and cottage cheese, although I love that. It was
yeah,
very much like really high fat, high quality olive oil, avocados. I was pricking my finger for a while, checking my GKI. Like it was strict and hard. And I also got to a place in my healing where I'm still doing a lot of things, but I also tell myself I have to live life like I'm healed. I don't always want to act like
right.
I'm sick and pricking my finger because then my body starts to believe that. And I got my supplement stuff right here. I got my handheld red light. I got my Bible, my journal. This is all on my desk because this is just my life. But I also had to get to a point where it's not controlling my life. I don't have cancer. I still have to be very proactive, but I also have to live life like I'm healed.
Right. And you want to not only you want to think like that, live like that, and be like that. You have
Mm.
to act like it.
Yeah.
Okay. You can't act, even though you don't feel good, act well.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Because,
And don't
I don't wake
limit
up
like
every
it's
day
mine.
feeling great. Okay. There's just
Yep.
like no one does, right? But you have to act well. You got
Mm.
to respond well. Because
Hmm.
I always say, if you complain, you remain. And so, and
I
then,
have so many one-liners from tonight. That's so good.
so it's like, and I know you have to convey, feelings and process that. That's okay. But let's transform them all into good. And that is completely possible. So it's,
Mindset of people saying, I see just even on the internet, on Instagram, people will have their Instagram bio. And if this is you, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to target. I'm just saying they say like, oh, I'm a chronic Lyme warrior. And by you labeling yourself as that, you're already telling yourself, I'm going to struggle with this forever. Yes, some diseases in quotes are chronic, but when you begin to believe, oh, I have a chronic disease, I have a chronic condition, even by you speaking that over yourself, you're already limiting your body and your mind to believing that you can heal. So, yes, I've struggled with Lyme. I've struggled with cancer. I don't say it's mine. I don't say my brain tumor. It's not my identity. I don't say my Lyme disease. It is something that I went through. It is something that there is a purpose and God has used to help others and share along this journey. And He's used it to completely pivot my life. I live on a farm now. I homeschool. I have so much to tell you, Dr. Connealy. And I'm thankful for how he's used it. But again, like we have to not limit our mind to think, oh, I'm just part of this prognosis and I'm this statistic. Like it is so, so important.
right. A patient responded, says, yes, I say I experienced X. That's right.
I
And
love that. I
it's
love that.
it's a temporary learning episode. And
Yes.
I always tell people episodes are not short because God wants you to remember it. Okay. So
Hmm.
if it's too short, you'll kind of like, oh, it wasn't even that big a deal. Like I forgot I even had it. So it has to be long enough for you to learn all the lessons that God wants you to learn. So,
Yeah.
and you know, if there's no problems, there's no solutions. Okay.
Mhm.
So, you know, if I always tell people about Mouse Utopia, the experiment Mouse Utopia. They created this perfect, this is a true thing. So if you don't know about Mouse Utopia, please,
I don't.
but yeah, please
I'm
go read
learning.
it because you don't want to create Mouse Utopia for your children,
Yep.
because they will be extinct fast if you do. But it is amazing experiment. They created this perfect existence, perfect life, and then they were, you know, they didn't last. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, so life is not perfect. We're all here for enlightenment, illumination, transformation, and through the only way we can help others. Like I was telling Alana, my daughter, this morning, and I said, Alana, I would know what I know without all the detours and curveballs that I have had in my life, literally. And I always tell people two cardinal rules: do not become your diagnosis, do
Hmm.
not own your diagnosis. Like you said, you don't say my this. Okay. No, it is all a temporary learning episode
Hmm.
so that you can help yourself and help others.
Others.
Yes.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even I think in my journey, sometimes I'm like, I'm grateful. I can say that 3 years out. Now, would I have chosen this? Probably not. If God gave me a multiple choice, I wouldn't have been like, B, I would love brain cancer. But in retrospect, I can see how he used it. And I also, it did force me to go resolve emotional trauma that I thought I was maybe good from just counseling. It was like a wake up call of like, look, your body might be hanging on to stuff. And the freedom that you get to walk in that healing for the rest of your life, like, it's amazing. And I'm like Dr. Connealy, I'm always doing work and I've never arrived. I think when you think you've arrived, it's just, yeah.
No, no, there's no finish line whatsoever. So let's go to questions. So it says here, could you please advise the most effective way to convince my 80-year-old mom, dad of the value of incorporating integrative medicine into my mom's cancer treatment? She's on immunotherapy, having new lung nodules appear, yet isn't willing to try adding an integrative medicine. It's so frustrating. And so, and then at what point is adding it too late? Well, that's so interesting because I always tell people, please come to me early when you first think of something or you first, you know, have something little, because so many people now contact me, like the girls were telling me today, oh my God, the flood of stage 4 cancer patients is just so many. And don't come to me like when it's stage 4, come to me in the beginning of the diagnosis, because when you do any treatment, when you do surgery, chemo, or radiation, or even a biopsy, it's injurious, immunosuppressive, inflammatory. So it creates its own problems. You know, like you prepared for 5 months, Taylor, before you even did. You prepared on a spiritual, emotional, but physical level. So, you know, I always have a saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. And your 80-year-old mom and dad, like all I would do is like be an encouraging spirit. I would just inspire them, try to maybe share some studies on things. But you know, they're 80, and you can't make people do things. And they're, if they don't feel like it's going to work, it's not going to work. There's the placebo and nocebo effect. So if they don't think it's going to work, and I hear this all the time, like they'll say, oh, Dr. Keeley, I told this person, that person, and they didn't follow through. And I go, well, you know, sometimes I feel like it's patients don't love themselves enough. They don't feel like they're worthy of being healed and completely
Mm.
healed, because anything I do in my clinic will not hurt you in any form or fashion. Not one thing. There
Hmm.
is no downside to any procedure that we do in the Center for New Medicine or Cancer Center for Healing. And so even our low dose chemo will not hurt you in any way. Okay. It's only, again, and I don't just do low dose chemo, but nothing disastrous has happened to any of our patients doing, you know, low dose chemo. And now that's what the doctors are recommending now, because they're saying the conventional chemo is too harsh on the immune system. You're just destroying the immune system. You probably have seen that interview with Patrick Soon Ling.
Yes.
He's recommending low dose chemotherapy and sunlight and dietary changes and water, you know, some basic things. But you can tell them that nothing that we do is going to harm them or hurt them. Even the repurposed drugs are very, very safe drugs. They're safer than Tylenol. Ivermectin is safer than Tylenol. So, and I've never had a patient have a medical problem from taking repurposed drugs. And also, you can just stop taking them if you were to have a side effect. So tell them, like, mom and dad, just start with one thing, maybe start with, eating changes. Okay. Then maybe suggest an IV vitamin C because the most recent studies of IV vitamin C in pancreatic cancer had extended their life dramatically. And so, but unfortunately, the patient has to be on board. I always tell my patients, I need you all in. I can't be more all in than you. Okay. And I usually am more all in than the patient because that's just kind of like who I am and what I am because I want that patient to win so bad. So,
Mhm.
um, so this
And
is
if someone's not open, read your book. I have told a million people about your book. It's like,
right.
hey, I might not convince them and I might not win them over in a conversation, but maybe you can plant seeds in the form of a book. And in times of desperation, that's when people are open-minded because they're like, I don't want to be a statistic. I'm having lots of side effects. And that's maybe in their desperate moment. But like you said, they have to believe it's going to work for them because mindset is so important, whether you're doing chemo or whether you're doing, what you're doing, it's like you still have to believe that it's working. And my young friend, a young mom has colon cancer. She's 32, she's so young,
Right.
just got
Mm,
diagnosed. And she's doing, thankfully, some, integrative things and hyperbaric and infusions locally. She couldn't fly out to California. She has 4 kids and, doing chemo every couple weeks. And but I said she's so amazing. She's saying, I thank God every time I get that infusion and I say thank you for healing me. I know you're healing me. And she's viewing it as not chemo and not poison, which it's a whole nother conversation to talk about the
that's
side
true. You're
effects of that.
blessing it.
But she's literally believing it and she's thanking God and she says, thank you for flowing through my veins and already healing every cell in my body. And I believe she's gonna beat it using everything she's doing healthy wise, but also the conventional. She believes it. And so anyway.
Right. So this patient is, what would be your approach to a low-grade glioma with low thyroid hormones? Well, my approach to any cancer patients is a whole body systems approach, like Taylor already mentioned on her slide. When it comes to cancer, you don't negotiate. You do everything. You do the repurposed drugs. And I always tell people to always read or listen to Thomas Seyfried's YouTubes on brain tumors. I love Thomas. I've known him a long time. And I love him because he's just so passionate.
Glucose and glutamine,
Yeah,
baby.
exactly. And the ketogenic and he's just so great. And so and he really, really cares. And so anyway, so of course start with that to get like you were doing the ketogenic diet, the metabolic approach, and then you've got to do, and I always add the repurposed drugs. And now I have intranasal ivermectin that I have local compounding pharmacists make. And then you got to clean up, you got to clean the garden and the environment the cancer came in because this is not about a body part being challenged and injured and damaged. Is what is the gargantuan terrain, the tumor microenvironment that is feeding this cancer. Okay. So you can go after it with surgeries and chemos and radiation, which add worsening to the tumor microenvironment. But so you have to do it all at the same time. You got to do the cleansing. You got to address the bugs, the fungus, the parasites, the viruses, the bacteria, all of those things. You got to address this spiritual emotional aspect. You got to address the toxicity. You got to address the heavy metals. I mean, all of those things, all the thorns that drag the body down, you've got to address and remove. And so low thyroid increases your risk for cancer. So you've got to correct the thyroid and thyroid diseases from Hashimoto's to low thyroid to cancer. Thyroid cancer is growing exponentially for a variety of reasons. So you got to fix the body in its entirety. All right. You can't put the finger in the dam and address one facet of the human miracle.
Do you have suggestions for alternatives to CTs and PET scans for screening for cancer after the fact?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. So what would you do if patients needed scans? Like CTs and PET scans. So now, for not all cancers, but for most cancers, there is a blood test called Signatera. So Signatera looks for circulating tumor DNA. Now, it is not available for brain, not yet. Eventually, I think there will be, but it's not for brain. But they do have blood tests that show circulating tumor DNA. It's called Signatera. It was first approved in 2017 for colorectal cancer. And the patient I had today had never had it done, which is so sad because it was approved 8 years ago, 9 years ago now, and she had not even had that test done, unfortunately. And and so then it was approved for all other cancers, and I've been using it for probably just 2 years for all the other cancers. So I'm not quick to order a scan if my Signatera is negative. Now, I will tell you that caveats. Prunuvo does do imaging for patients. They don't like doing imaging with patients that already have a diagnosed cancer, as you know. And sometimes I write a letter and saying, look, I know you don't do this, but I need this on this patient, and I understand the risk, and the patient understands the risk, but this is way better than getting a CT and a PET scan. And then I love ultrasound imaging. Now, you can't ultrasound the whole body yet, but that is on the horizon to ultrasound the whole body using quantitative transmission. And that's going to revolutionary because it's a non-toxic treatment. They have it for the breast now. It's going to be for the whole body. And that's going to revolutionize like PET scans, CT scans, and everything because it's non-injurious, no radiation, no dyes. But if you do like an abdominal and pelvic ultrasound, and that's what I personally do on myself, is I do an abdominal and pelvic ultrasound probably every 6 months. And I've done chest x-rays. And of course, I do our bioenergetic testing. I do that about once a year, once every 15 months or so. And because, I got into this field to prevent cancer because my mother took DES when she was pregnant with me. So I've been on an anti-cancer journey. And that's why I learn everything I want to learn because there's always you can up your game. So anyway, so that's what I would do. Of course, you have to individualize every patient's journey. And I do now have imaging places that will work with me. And I go, I know what this patient has, but we need to do this. And we'll do whole body MRIs and non-toxic whole body imaging. So I think it's, decided on an individualized basis. So.
And I did do Datar. I think they're the only ones I think they're doing the circulating
Right.
field.
They do.
I did that. I don't know. Do y'all still use that?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. The good, because Signatera, all my like breasty girlies, like we call them my breasties, all the ones that have battled breast cancer, they all are talking about their Signatera. And I'm like, that's not an option for me. But I did do Datar and to
Right.
show,
Exactly.
and still
Yeah,
doing.
Datar is another. So there's RGCC, there's Datar. Those are the two main cancer testing that we utilize. Signatera is in US. And but again, like you never rely because everybody goes, oh, my Signatera is fine. No, that doesn't tell you you're fine. That is just 1/100th of what's going on here. So yes, it's important, but you can't rely on one testing for anything. Signatera is looking at circulating tumor DNA from the biopsy. RGCC is looking at circulating tumor cells. But again, that is not the whole picture. There are 1,000 other things that every practitioner should be looking at if they're treating a cancer patient, because I never rely on one avenue when I'm assessing and diagnosing a patient. I do blood work, I do Signatera, I do scans, I do because it's all about how never to get cancer again. So, all right. So this is a cute little lady. She's 89 years old.
Gentlemen.
Oh, it's a gentleman? Okay. Sorry about that. But anyway, he was recently diagnosed with bowel cancer. I'm approaching my 89th birthday this year and have been watching my diet for 2 decades. A recent weight loss was the reason for my diagnosis. So he could be our perfect patient, okay? So he said, I worked for 70 years in the pharmaceutical industry, but I never took any pharmaceutical drugs. I hear that story all the time. The pharmaceutical reps never take the medicines they sell. And so this would be, you could definitely, I can see you. This is totally doable. The key thing with bowel cancer, and I tell every patient this, is that some patients, and I have had patients who have not done surgery for the bowel cancer. Now, they're usually older patients because cancer is slow growing. That's the only benefit to getting old is that you're slow growing. Okay. You're young, that's a whole nother conundrum. You don't wait mess around when people are young. But when you're older, cancer is slower growing. And so I have a patient that I've watched for years who's had colon cancer and never had surgery. So he's probably in his 70s now, probably 70s now. And his doctor also worked with me. He was totally fine with collaborating and doing the scans and doing everything that we needed to do. But the thing you have to be careful about with colon cancer is you never want it to be an emergency. Don't ever want an emergency obstruction where you had to have surgery. So that's when I tell people, no, you've got to have this surgery. You've got to get it done and taken care of. But they now, they measure these tumors, so they know how big they are. So this gentleman at 89, it sounds like sounds like he's pretty healthy. But you could totally, in today's world, laparoscopically take this tumor out and probably not do any kind of other treatment. So because he's 89, and then I'd protect the patient before surgery with IVs for the anesthesia before and after, and with hyperbaric. So that's something that could easily be handled. But that's a great question because he's 89. There's not, usually don't do a lot of interventions, at that age, right? So
I love that he cares.
I know. I think that's what
amazing.
I think. I think it's just great. I just love it when people, are 80. First of all, just to be 89 is iconic. Okay.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, because when the average age for women is 78, and average age for mortality for male is 75. So he's far superseded it. Yeah, it's the third year we've gone down. Yes.
Wait, I did not know this. I have so many clinical pearls from tonight because of you. I feel like I'm walking away much more smarter with statistics.
Yeah.
That is so disappointing.
It's so
the
disappointing.
Advanced medical system that spends the most on healthcare.
Yes.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's literally unbelievable. Japan has the highest longevity, but they incorporate health into their culture. Everything is health oriented in Japan. Okay. And so no, we are not living longer. We're not living better. We're being managed chronically with lots of medications. So
and being poisoned and with toxins everywhere and unaware.
Right. Well, thank you everyone for being part of our life journey today, and for Taylor Dukes to share her inspiring, wonderful, but life-changing journey. And hopefully you guys were able to learn lots of pearls and lots of things to take action for yourself and to help others be the best at their life also. So
you're the best. Thank you for having me. Thank you all to all of you who have joined. I hope you guys feel educated, equipped, and empowered to go and change the world and take charge of your health, right?
Yes, we can do this together.
We got to put in the work. You're the best.
Right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.